What happens when two successful entrepreneurs get together for a drink? They talk shop, of course. So grab your favorite cocktail and sit alongside Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso, two seasoned business leaders that have driven their own companies to success, as they share from their experience and dive deep into the secret sauce that can turn a company around. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the CEO Podcast, Cocktails, Entrepreneurs, and Opportunity. And I'm Vince Moiso, and I'm sitting here with my friend Scott DeLong. Today, the topic is going to be around trust in the workplace, which I think is a pretty hot topic. Trust is a big word. It's a general word. Yet I feel it is incredibly important within any workplace. It arguably can be the foundation of a culture within a workplace. So, Scott, you've done a lot of work on this. In a previous podcast, we talked about communication, which is, I think, trust and communication are probably two biggest topics for you that you've done most of your work. I think you included both of those topics within your dissertation when you got your Ph.D.
Yeah.
So tell me your feelings on trust in the workplace.
So my doctoral dissertation was on building trust in a cross-functional work group. So there's a lot of studies on how to build teams and all of that. And trust is always on top of that list on how to build teams. And it also says that homogeneity is also good. So cross-functional work teams is even more difficult because if you're in accounting and I'm in sales, we already have this natural, Cobra-like conflict with each other, right? And building that. So my dissertation was based on building this. And what we did is we found a process that actually works. And the process is communication. It's communication.
Well, so tell us more. I mean, I know it feeds off of the deep discussion we had. I mean, we cut it into two parts essentially because there's so much you can talk about with regards to communication. So, okay, so what can you do to focus on trust as a part of communication in the workplace?
Well, so first let's define what trust is.
Sure.
Right. Trust is the and the research and the seminal research on this was done by a group back in the 90s, and basically what they claimed trust is the vulnerability of others' actions.
Yeah.
And the faith that you'll have that they will perform on those actions. So I'm giving you trust. It's broken down into a couple different things. There's something called a cognitive trust. Cognitive trust is where I know you're competent to do the thing. I trust that you have the ability to do it. And then there's the affective trust. And affective is that I believe that you have the benevolence to perform that. Not only do you have the ability, but you have the benevolence to perform those acts, and therefore I can trust you. And what our research was to say, in the workplace, there's cognitive trust all the time. I know the accountants do a good job. They're fine. They know how to count beans. Salespeople know how to sell things, that sort of thing. I know that you're good at your thing. Good. I can trust that you can do that. But it's the affective trust that we worked on building within this study that allowed teams to be created. So the affect of me actually have an affection for you. I like you. That's that type of trust that we're talking about. And that's an important part if you want to build a team. Not just they know they can do it, which is important, certainly, but that I want to do this with you because I like you.
Yeah.
Right? And that I know that I can be vulnerable with you and that you're not going to, put your boot on my neck because I'm being vulnerable and take advantage of me in those sorts of ways. So it becomes really important, especially if you want to build cross-functional teams, but even with a sales organization. If you just take one portion of a team that everyone has, you would think the same motives, right? And the same thought process, you want that team to trust, well, you would think. You want that team to trust each other as well. Sales might be a bad example because
it's a great example.
There's a lot of cutthroat.
No, I think it's a great example. And I think I love that definition that you put together. And what I heard as the key component of all that is vulnerability.
Yeah.
And there's no quicker way. We know this is there's just no quicker way to trust than being vulnerable yourself.
Yeah.
And I know this, and I learned it the hard way, is the only person I can control is me. I can't control anybody else.
That's right.
So if I'm willing to be vulnerable, then I can create trust very quickly with another individual. And that's where that stems from. So now what I want to hear from you is what does it take to build trust within an organization?
So there's a few things there, right? So there's trust is broken down into some other categories. There's a propensity to trust.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain people that are more trusting than others, right?
Yeah.
So there's those with a propensity to trust and those without. Then there are exhibiting trusting behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to build trust, especially with someone that doesn't have a propensity to trust. You have to exhibit trusting behaviors.
Sure.
Trusting behaviors start with vulnerability. That I am willing to be vulnerable to you first, not wait for you to do it for me. And that's a trusting behavior, right? That I'm willing to do that, and I'm going to take the risk. And there's a risk.
Yeah.
There's a risk in being vulnerable. I grew up with that, right? In my family of origin, vulnerability was a weakness, not a strength.
Sure. Same for me.
It was if there's a couple people in my family that if you were vulnerable with things, they would either laugh at you, that boot on the neck, that's where that came from for me, right? So it took me a lot of years to get to that spot that I could be vulnerable.
I hear you.
But here's what I found out. That vulnerability is attractive. And I don't mean sexually attractive, but it's an attractive quality. If the more that I am vulnerable to you, the more you're going to want to hang out with me and then share with me and do things more with me. It just works, right? There's a keynote that I give on this, and it's kind of interesting. So the big group of people out there, and I say, so here I am, 61-year-old guy, overweight, my best days are way behind me. But I tell people I can get a, and I'm a happily married guy too, but I can get a date in any place that I go to. And that is by me being curious, me wanting to know about you. Mm. So, and I do this, I take someone in the front row and I just start a conversation. And then I start asking her about her, right? Me being interested. So there's an old saying that says, you want to be interesting? Be interested. So the way this normally goes is I ask a question and she'll answer that, then ask another question based on her answer and another question based on her answer. And I think I did this in the thing that I did with the EO with that group.
You did.
And then I finally looked down and said, you want to go to coffee? They always say yes. Like, now, I don't know if they're playing along with the game or if I really could get that date, but by me being interested in you, you have more affinity to want to hang out with me.
Sure.
Because what's more important, go back to the Dale Carnegie stuff, right?
Really, the reciprocity of what you're talking about is the big issue, right? So if I'm willing to be vulnerable, then that means, Scott, that you're willing to be vulnerable with me. I mean, it immediately lets the guard down. Now, okay, here's the debate for me though.
Okay.
Is trust earned or is it given?
That goes back to that propensity of trust.
Yep.
There are some people, I'm a very trusting person. This is my nature. And I do it based on my thought process on karma and saying, I'm going to do this with you because I learned that it works. And if you screw that up, that's on you and not my problem. But not everyone's like that. And I get it. I wasn't when I was younger as well. So there are places that trust needs to be earned.
Yeah.
For me and in the future, I want trust to be given until you screw up. And that doesn't work with everybody, right?
So under that model, and I actually agree with it because that wasn't where I necessarily was at a younger age, especially throughout the years. Again, I'll just tell this quick story is, my dad passed away at 62 years old. He had Alzheimer's and dementia. And he had about a 4-year battle with it. So he had early onset.
Wow. He
was diagnosed at the age of 58, and it went fast. And I did what I've said this before. in our introduction, and I come from an Italian-American family. I was laughed at for being vulnerable, at an early age. Not to mention the fact that we didn't show emotion, crying wasn't a good thing, all of these things. So what do you think I did with all that grief and guilt about my dad's passing? I just packed it up in a nice, neat little ball, shoved it as far down as it could go. And there it stayed for about 17 years. So you can imagine, it just became more and more difficult as I became closed and whatnot. So it was vulnerability is a learned behavior.
Yes.
For me. Right. And so,
but think through that. So what if, right? What if you decided to tell somebody that story and they just like looked at you with loving eyes and empathy and like, wow, how'd you feel about that person then?
Yeah, they're just listening.
Yeah.
And I feel good about that. I said, wow, somebody really listened to what I have to say. And, puts me in a comfortable place, right? A place of trust. So what I was ultimately getting at was I agree with the fact that for me, trust is given. So I trust you. I don't really, it's like if I'm in a situation with somebody, I don't really know you. I don't want to come from a place of I distrust you because I don't know you.
You need to earn it.
That's terrible. It's to me is my trust is yours until you lose it, and that's the way I approach most situations. There certainly are exceptions to that. So with that said, I heard you say something really interesting to me. Is okay under that model, right, mm-hmm. Scott? You have my trust until you lose it.
Right.
Can you re-earn it?
Yeah, you can, but it's harder to. So, and the research talks about this as well. So it is harder to re-earn a trust that's lost rather than have it initially with almost everybody. But there's a process that you need to go to. The first thing that we need to do if we want to rebuild trust is that we need to own our mistakes. We need to own the thing that we did that broke that trust and apologize to the person. A sincere apology, not like, I didn't mean it. Sorry. Right? That's crap. That's crap.
Yeah.
Dude, I know I hurt you.
Ownership creates a lot of trust, by the way, along with vulnerability in my mind. So one of my favorite books is You're Aware by Jocko Willink. He's ex-Navy SEAL. It's Extreme Ownership. Mm-hmm. It's such a powerful book. And I did the Audible version and he tells it. He's got this deep, raspy voice, exactly what you would picture this Navy SEAL that's, out in the Middle East and he's
tough killer.
Oh my God. Like, I don't know. I just fell into this book in a big way. And I've listened to it a couple of times. But extreme ownership is what you're talking about. Right. And I totally agree with that. There's no easier way to just knock the wall down between two people if you just own your shit, just if immediately whatever happened, you say that's on me 100%. What else is there to say at that point, right? Like what argument is there when you've just owned the situation and you said that's completely on me? And then even if it's a trust scenario mm-hmm. where, okay, great, because we're talking about re-earning trust, right? So if it's a trust scenario and I've lost that trust, and I walk over to you, Scott, and I say, I own 100% of what I did. I lost your trust, Scott, and that's on me. And there's literally no excuse. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you any story about it. I'm not going to give you any reasons or excuses or anything that you could perceive as excuses because there is no excuse for my behavior. And the fact that I lost your trust, Scott, how can I re-earn it? How can I earn your trust back?
So that's a good start. And with some people that may be enough. But for others, it may not be.
No.
So now we may have to prove it, right?
Nor should you expect it, right? Like
sure.
you shouldn't expect it to be one or the other. Like that's enough, right? Sometimes, I've heard this before. Just say I'm sorry and shut up.
Yeah.
Don't say anything else. Say I'm sorry And then from there, just listen.
And that could be a good start. Now I may have to prove myself again, right? So that I may have to go into my actions speak louder than words, right? Anyone can say they're sorry and move on. And I've dealt with lots of folks, and narcissists in particular, right? That will apologize for beating the woman, and then they'll beat her again, and
well, there's extreme versions of it, right?
Yeah. So
that's why I said earlier, there's exceptions.
So your apology may be appreciated and still may not land. It may not be enough for you to earn that trust back. So now I've got to prove it. Now I've got to come back and can keep doing the thing that I'm doing and showing who I am and show my true stripes and show that thing that broke your trust was a mistake. One that I owned, two, that's not going to happen again. And here's who I am. So, but it takes a while.
Yeah.
It's easier to get it the first time. Like you only get one chance to make a good first impression. I don't believe that necessarily, but in trust, you screw up once, you may end it with somebody. Yeah. Especially if you don't own it.
Well, let's transition. So how does all this fit into the workplace? Let's talk about, why is trust so important within an organization? Why is it critical to the culture of an organization?
Because I believe that there are no true relationships unless they're built on trust. Positive relationships I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And in a workplace, it is a series of relationships that we're dealing with. We're not dealing with spreadsheets. We're dealing with people, right? There's like, we can have systems and processes and spreadsheets, and we can have all the data analytics and all that. Great. And a company needs those things to operate. Absolutely. No question you need to have processes.
Well, they're only as good as the people running them.
But then you're dealing with people, right? So are people going to act in their best way for the organization if they don't trust you? The answer is no.
Probably not.
They're not. So you have to, as a leader or as a teammate or as a whatever relationship that you want to do, if that's not built with a level of trust, and I'm not just talking about the cognitive trust that I know you can sell the crap out of that thing, you're good at that, right? I need to want to hang out with you in order to give you more of my stuff. Mm-hmm. In order for me to be more vulnerable, I think the affective trust is as important, if not more important, than the cognitive trust of knowing that you can do the thing, but I have to want to provide you the information as well.
Well, certainly we were talking about sales earlier. You gave sales as the example, mm-hmm. and I think it's a quintessential example
don't beat yourself up. It's a hard word
of trust, but it's critical. Yeah. It's a critical piece of the external relationships that you build with clients, right? Is typically based on a high level of trust. And what I've learned over leading and owning, many companies at this point is that the internal relationships are equally as important, right? And what's the adage? Take care of your people will take care of your customers, right? And I think if you build trust within an organization with your people and the relationships mm-hmm. that are built from that within an organization, the rest just falls into place. Because if the expectation within a culture is a culture of trust within the organization, that exudes to what you're doing outside.
So let's go back to the sales context. A customer's not going to buy from me unless they trust me, that I can deliver, whatever, right?
Of course.
That trust.
It's critical.
So I look at internal in the organization as a series of two things. You have your team and you have your internal customers. Mm-hmm. So the folks in accounting, the folks in manufacturing, the folks in shipping, the folks in whatever are my internal customer. If I'm a sales guy, for instance, I need to take care of them like I would take care of the customer. And if the people in shipping, if the people in manufacturing, well, let's go with that. I place an order. You need to go build a whole bunch of things, right? Whatever widgets that you're building. Yeah. And you don't trust that that's a real order. Are you going to build them? Is the CFO going to give you the money to build them if they don't trust the sales guy with his order?
Absolutely.
So trust is as important internally as it is externally.
Yeah, I have that scenario with two of my guys right now where, they are as good as it gets, as far as I'm concerned, with the way they are with external customers. I mean, I've watched them in presentations. I've been in many meetings with them, and they're as good as it gets. And then it's funny how they treat employees internally quite differently. And so my coaching tends to be focused on, well, hey, how were you when we were with customer ABC, right? Let's recall that meeting. And we'll recall that meeting. And I said, remember when we were having the meeting internally with, so-and-so?
Yeah.
And I said, did you act the same way? No. Well, the way that you acted there, would you ever act like that for customer A, B, and C? No, never.
Right.
Well, did you hear what you said?
Yeah.
I mean, you're creating trust here and not creating that trust here. Do you see where the breakdown is? And it's a powerful thing when you can have that conversation. You realize that it boils down to trust, right? Because I don't know about you, probably the worst words, and I've heard these words before. I've heard them, and they're gut wrenching. Oh, I can't trust you anymore.
Yeah, no, right?
Doesn't work.
That would crush me.
It's crushing.
That would crush me.
And it has crushed.
I can't think of when I've heard those, because this trust has always been a thing for me. It's not like, there's a lot of things that I didn't learn until I hit 50, but this has always been one that's big for me. If someone didn't, like, I remember as a kid that I would say, because all kids lie, right? I don't ever remember lying. So if someone said they didn't trust me, it would crush me. It would crush me.
I think most people feel that way, Scott. Well, let's bring this home. How can you bring together the connection between trust and communication?
That's pretty simple. So, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to talk about it because it's the theory on which everything that I do, and it's what I call the circle of trust, and it's actually turned into a cycle. And the circle of trust starts with respect, and it's the respect that is given to another human being, not the one that's earned because you're awesome at something.
Yeah.
That comes later, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So start with respect. That's a human being, that they deserve a level of respect, and the way that I communicate with them. It moves into listening, the whole listening skills, back to the communication portion, listening to understand, the Stephen Covey concept, listening to understand as opposed to listening to reply, trying to find out where you're coming from. The more I do that, the more you're going to want to hang out with me, right? The next portion of that is an EO concept, a share from experience, as opposed to telling you what to do, what you should do. One of the biggest things that's happened to me in my life is taking the word should out of my vocabulary.
Yep.
And that has been dramatic. Even with my own children, I take that out. They like me better.
Yeah. Because
I don't tell them what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is delivering on the promise. So that's the circle of trust. Now that turns into a cycle. And I believe this, and I haven't proven it yet, empirically, but I believe I can. And that is, the cycle says that you start with intention as the start. If I don't have an intention to build trust, doesn't matter. Don't even bother. I need the intention. Go through that cycle one time, or a circle one time, and you get to the next stage of that is authenticity. Which you can see, I'm a real guy. I'm a real, I believe in this, right?
Yeah.
Then that authenticity goes into the cycle, the next one, and we'll put a graphic on this, but that turns into respect. And this is the respect that's earned. So if I got into intention, authenticity, now I'm starting to earn your respect, right?
Yeah.
That turns into building trust.
Got it.
That moves into relationship. Without those first, so people say that, well, it takes so long to build trust because they go through a normal cycle and say, I just got to keep doing what I say I'm going to do. I got to keep doing what I say I'm going to do. I got to keep doing what I say I'm going to do, and I'll get trust. Yes, that's true. But it takes a long time to do that. I believe 3 times through this circle of trust, intent, authenticity, respect, turns to trust. That trust builds a relationship.
I'm visualizing all of this, right, as you're saying it, as this flow chart.
Yeah, it's
right?
exactly what it is.
It's a symbiotic relationship, trust and communication, right? So, when I'm looking at it, you can interlock it, right? Like they're interlocking circles almost. And then as you put respect and authenticity and all these things around it, right, you've got what visually looks like this, completely connected relationship. So the one goes hand in hand with the other.
Yeah, we'll put up a graphic on this because it's exactly what it looks like. It's a cycle that goes like this, boom, 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 and all of a sudden now we're in a relationship.
Yeah,
and that relationship built on trust, not built on need. Like I need this from you because you got to deliver that thing. Yeah, let's build it based on trust.
Thanks for listening.
Externally.
Thanks for listening to the CEO podcast. And as always, we could talk on these topics for an hour or longer. We teach, we coach, and we spend weeks with organizations on these topics because it's not enough to just talk about it. The execution of these topics are critical to any organization. So it takes development, it takes training, it takes practice.
And we're going to mess up, right? So I've been working on this for the last 11 years of my life, and I still mess up from time to time. But I do believe 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still forward.
Yeah.
So we're going to mess up. We're human. Things happen. Forgive yourself, move on, and try and continue to do better. But it takes practice.
Well, again, with the sports analogy, right? It's funny in business how we lose what is just this, super basic thing about sports, right? Well, you can't just all show up to a game and expect to win that game if you haven't spent the whole previous week or month practicing for that game, right? But yet in business, we lose sight of the practice we need for these things, right? You need to practice earning trust. You need to practice communication. You need to practice all the things that we're talking about. And if you do that on a regular basis, it starts to become very natural. It starts to become habit. So again, any questions, please let us know. Any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. If you have differing opinions, we want to hear from you. Let us know. Any and all feedback is really, really, really great. Scott, what do we got today? So this is tasty.
This is a mass-produced beer. It's another IPA done by the Kona Brewing Company, and it's just their Island IPA.
Hanalei. It's good. I haven't had that one before. Kona Brewing Company is great. Like they put out some good beers. Again, easy ones, store bought that you can grab. We were talking about this earlier. I prefer bottled versus canned.
Yes.
I like the bottled beers, and there's a lot of them in the stores that you can get now. You've got a lot of choices from a lot of craft breweries. That it's as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing like getting a draft beer, in my opinion.
Nothing like a draft. So we're gonna bring John on pretty soon. John's our producer, and he does all. He's a beer guy. He brews his own, and he's been telling me that in the craft world, that cans. There's something about cans, and I think it's just easier to can than bottle, but. We'll bring him on and have him talk about it.
But what do we know, right?
Yeah,
I'm certainly not.
I just drink it.
I'm not a brewmaster, but I know enough to be dangerous. So anyways, this is good. It's tasty. Cheers.
Thanks.
Until next time.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. To learn more about Scott and Vince, please visit theceopodcast.net and check out the calendar to tune in for our next episode. While on the site, you can also listen to past episodes, access additional content created for our listeners, and if you would like to dive deeper into any topic, there is an option to schedule some time with Scott or Vince. Thanks for listening.